Right, fantastic. I think we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second round of Make for Tomorrow. And we've got a gorgeous little mini series for you this month. And we're so happy to have you here. So thank you for joining us wherever you are, whether you're in a hospital ward, in an office, at home, at your kitchen table, or watching us on your phone. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. And for those of you that this is your first time here, so Make for Tomorrow is a really exciting online arts event, series of arts events and workshops with some extraordinary performers and people from the world of film and television and theatre and literature. And we've also had in the autumn last year some incredible visual artists also doing some workshops. So my name's Lucy. I work for Sussex Partnership Trust. I'm their arts and health lead. And you can go to our Make Your Mark YouTube channel and you can see all these brilliant different events that we ran last year. So you can watch them retrospectively. And indeed, this one this lovely treat we've got for you this afternoon will also be up on my YouTube channel by tomorrow morning, we hope. So if you want to share it with someone else, or you need to pop out and come back in, you can catch the whole thing once we've uploaded it. But without further ado, I do just want to welcome our amazing speakers this afternoon. We are so lucky. We've been working in partnership with Arts Over Borders, who are one of the extraordinary partners on this programme, and they have curated this series of wonderful live in conversations with some amazing people, and there's been some amazing chats that have been had, and we are so blessed. This afternoon we've got two fabulous men who are going to be chatting together, and also with you we've got the extraordinary actor and a big love in our country, Simon Callow, and he is going to be chatting with Stephen Gale. Now Stephen, I've got a lovely little introduction that I must read out about you, because you are have got these great accolades. So let me read this. It says, since 1997, Stephen has moderated over 500 author events at literature festivals worldwide, including Edinburgh, Cheltenham, Adelaide, Sydney, Dubai, and Paris. Stephen is a former assistant artistic director at the Royal Lyceum Theatre in Edinburgh, and since the year 2000, he's worked as project manager on many arts and education projects involving cultural change in challenging multi-stakeholder and partnership environments. So two extraordinary men. And just to say, people, we love it when you join in. So underneath the screen on our Make Your Mark homepage, there's a little button that says Ask Simon a Question. So do, at any point, if you've got any comments, any questions, just click that button. It'll open another little tab and you can type in your whatever you want to ask or want to say, press submit, and it'll come through to us here, and Stephen will pick that up and hopefully bring it into the conversation. But I think that's about it from me for now. I will hand over to the amazing Stephen and Simon, and enjoy, everyone, and please do get involved, and I'll see you at the end. All right, thanks everyone, and thanks Stephen, thanks Simon, see you in a bit.
Hello, my name is Stephen Gale, and I am exceptionally pleased to be in conversation with our guest, Simon Callow, this afternoon. Simon is an actor, writer, director. He was born in London and studied at Queen's University Belfast and trained as an actor at Drama Centre in London. He has acted with many of our most renowned theatre companies, including the Royal Court Theatre, the Bristol Old Vic, and the National Theatre, where, among other roles, he played Mozart in the original production of Amadeus, and he has appeared in London's West End on many occasions. He has also played Charles Dickens many times, including in a one-man show in the theatre, in film, and several times on television, including in Doctor Who. And among his many film performances are A Room with a View, Shakespeare in Love, and of course, the much beloved Four Weddings and a Funeral. Simon has directed many theatre, operas and musicals, including, to name just a handful, Shirley Valentine, Die Fledermaus, My Fair Lady, and Carmen Jones. And among his books are Being an Actor, the memoir Love is Where It Falls, and biographies of Charles Laughton and Orson Welles. Now, such a brief summary doesn't even begin to do justice to the range and depth of Simon's work, and I'm very, very much looking forward to talking with him this afternoon. Simon, welcome, and it's great that you're here with us this afternoon. Thank you for sparing the time.
Delighted, Stephen, absolutely delighted.
I wondered if I could ask, you're so amazingly industrious and you have such wide interests. And I thought it might just be interesting to know if I could ask you to cast your mind back to when the original lockdown was announced last spring. What were you working on then and where were you?
I was rehearsing, acting in and rehearsing a Broadway musical on 42nd Street. And there'd been some problem with the visa. So I arrived 10 days late. I started rehearsing on the Wednesday. I rehearsed on the Thursday and on the Friday morning. And at Friday lunchtime, the producer came in and said, "Sorry, guys, we're pulling the show. Simon, you'll be on the plane tonight." So I was back in England only 4 days after I'd arrived. And very lucky to have got out because President Trump, as he then was, imposed a travel ban almost immediately afterwards. That started the unraveling of an entire year of what promised to be really wonderful and fascinating work, which just never really happened at all.
So I imagine, I'm sure as an actor, things do come at you from left field all the time and I think opportunities you least expect. But I imagine that for the first time, perhaps in a little while, you had this block of time when you were expecting to be in the United States and suddenly you were back in London. Would that be the case? And how did you adjust to that shift? Did you have other projects in the back of your mind?
Well, I've always got things that I'm working on, and logically, of course, I would have said I knew I had to write the fourth and final volume of this massive epic biography of Orson Welles that I've been writing since 1989. Three volumes have come out, and I've got all the material for the fourth volume, and obviously the most sensible thing to do would have been to sit down and write that. Like many people, I found it sort of impossible to grapple with anything as big as that. I felt cut off at the knees suddenly. I felt grounded, which I sort of almost literally was, and we all were. I found that all that I could really do was to concentrate on small, easily achievable objectives. So one of the first things that happened to me, which was really wonderful and was a great salvation, was that there was a series, there still is, I think, called Culture in Quarantine.
Yes.
And it mostly then anyway, I think possibly still, consisted of people being approached to make a film at home about some subject or another. And I was asked to do something about Shakespeare. And I said the best thing to do is to do something about the sonnets of Shakespeare, partly because they're just immortal, great, astounding achievements in themselves, which are also generally not so well known. Even people who know their Shakespeare very well, they don't know the sonnets that well, but also because they're preoccupied with mortality and change and time. Time, it seemed to me very quickly into this, of course we had no idea how long it was going to last, but into this long on-off period of lockdown that we've all endured. Time is the thing that has suffered terribly. I have no sense of time anymore. And I recently began to feel it's as if time itself had been infected by the virus, and it becomes sluggish and feverish by turns, but it doesn't seem to be mine anymore. I thought I had a fairly good grip on time. You do one thing after another, more or less. You have these achievable objectives, and then suddenly there was nothing at all. There was nothing to really grasp hold of. Well, Shakespeare is the greatest of all authors on the subject of time, and really the sonnets are about humankind's battle with time. Time, which, as he says, will always catch up with you in the end. Time is the great enemy, time with his scythe and so on. So I thought, well, I'll try and make a little film about that. And So I did. I once upon a time performed all of Shakespeare's sonnets from memory at the National Theatre one afternoon in 1980. And so I'd done them all over the place, but not so many. And so I just decided to take a small group of sonnets. And with my iPhone and a little tripod that you can attach it to, I found that I could really make something quite an interesting little film, because if you hold the tripod in your hand and you hold it up like this, you can do very interesting overhead shots, and then you can walk along with the camera out of shot and do tracking shots. I did tracking shots in my garden. Turned out to be this very ambitious little 40-minute film, and I learned the sonnets again and the ones that I did, and that was a huge relief, because I thought, well, one can sort of get round this somehow, but of course there's a limit to what you can do with that. And but over the last year, we're almost a year into this pandemic, I've done a lot of things, but small things like that. A small film that I acted in about Alexander Pope, in which I was more or less the only actor, apart from one memorable scene with Harriet Walter, but she was the only other actor that I saw. And just in a week, we shot this marvelous film about Pope. Just as well, really, that I was playing, I was on my own as Pope, because he was 4'7", I think, and I don't know quite how they would have found the actors to cheat it for me to look his size, but that was very gratifying, and so on. And I've done a lot of writing. I haven't written anything about Orson Welles at all, and I've done an awful lot of stuff of this nature, of talking to people. I've recorded for various charities and organizations and friends. I've recorded novels and poems and essays and all sorts of things. And a lot of it's been very rewarding, very wonderful to do. I did a whole series of, educational programs, again about Shakespeare and then about Dickens. I recorded hours of Dickens for the Dickens Museum at home, on my iPhone. So as people can go to the website, and because the Dickens Museum, like everyone else, was also grounded, shut. They like all museums, their operation is on a shoestring, really. And if you just remove that shoestring, then you're in terrible trouble. But they didn't have anybody. Nobody could visit the Dickens Museum, and that just the steady stream of income kept them afloat, and wonderfully so. And I wanted to help if I could in some way, and so I did contribute that to the website. But in the end, of course, you ache for the real thing.
Yes.
I mean, you do ache for it. And the luckiest thing that happened to me is that a friend of mine founded a wonderful organization called the Fidelio Orchestra, which is partly made up of amateur musicians and partly professional musicians. Amateur musicians to a very, very high level, but they play together, and it's marvelous that. And they very sensibly bought themselves, got the lease on a shop and turned it into a cafe. And that sort of boosted the orchestra's income to some extent. But Raffaello, who created the orchestra and created the cafe, had this great idea that whenever lockdown stopped, he would gather together friends of his who were musicians to play, sometimes for 3 or 4 nights, a week, concerts would play, and for an hour or so in this tiny cafe. But some of the greatest musicians in the world, Stephen Isserlis, the cellist, Pavel Kolesnikov, the wonderful Russian pianist, Charles, absolutely wonderful players. And after it, they'd have a meal, because there's a full kitchen in the cafe. And Raffaello, to my amazement, had the idea that maybe an actor could be part of that as well. So I did a week there, and I did it about Dickens. Again, in the same way that I wanted to do something about Shakespeare, I wanted to do something about Dickens for a different reason, because Dickens is such a blazing fire of energy and life and humor and on such a grand scale. And everything seemed to be getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So I thought I'd do a program in Clerkenwell about Dickens, whose first job was in Clerkenwell, whose first house was in Clerkenwell. The first house he had as an adult was in Clerkenwell. And so I did the show. And it was a wonderful experience. But how extraordinary it was after months to be standing in front of an audience again.
Yes.
And I think it was extraordinary for the audience to have someone standing in front of them again and acting. And we were both very shy. The audience and I were very shy. It was like a sort of first date or something. But as it went on, as the show went on,
Yeah.
and Dickens is start to work his magic, and the storytelling began to bite. We forgot all about that, our shyness, and it took off, and it was that extraordinary interchange between performers and an audience, where the audience changes the performers by its response, but the performers change the audience by what they're giving them, what they're releasing into their minds, the effect they're having on their imagination, and it's a big healing thing, and I think we all felt very healed by the experience.
It's been very comforting, I find, that there has been this sort of outburst of creativity in times of adversity, as is often the case. May I just ask, the films you made with your iPhone in the garden, are they available? Are they archived? Can one see those?
I think you can. I think if you go to the Culture in Quarantine website, you can just go down and you can find that. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. You mentioned, obviously, you played Dickens many times. You mentioned that Dickens would be diagnosed with bipolar. Could you tell us more? People with that sort of diagnosis, usually, this is a question from Helen, who's typed in this question, who's watching as we speak. People often hugely appreciate exploring the lives of famous individuals and how they experience the condition. Could you talk a bit about that, getting to know Dickens?
Well, one uses words like bipolar, and everybody knows what you mean. But of course, yes. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a psychiatrist. So I'm not specifically saying that medically Dickens was bipolar. But what I'm saying is that he experienced great depression in his life and bursts of almost inconceivable energy. And in Dickens's case, it's perfectly clear what it came from, which is that when he was 11 and for nearly 18 months, he was put to work in a shoe polish factory. This very bright, very imaginative little boy was set to doing every single day of his working life, which was 6 days a week in that rat-infested, dismal and damp factory, which is on the embankment, just where Embankment Station is now, just there by the Hungerford Steps. And what he had to do, this boy, was to stick a label on the bottle and then to put a paper cap on it and to tie it round 20 times with a piece of string and to tighten it. That he did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times a day. And worse than that, he felt that he was, that he'd lost everything, that he'd lost his family, his father, and indeed the rest of the family were in prison. They were in the Marshalsea prison, having a rather nice time, actually, a much nicer time than he was having. He was put out into lodgings in Camden Town, and he felt he desperately limited amount of money he was earning and only just about managed to get through the week, or generally didn't quite get through the week, was hungry always on Saturday until he visited the family every Sunday. And he felt that all the wonderful life that he'd had before they came to London, all the fun and the family warmth and entertainment had been taken away from him completely. And worst of all, he felt that his education, which has really only just started by then, had been terminated completely. He desperately tried to remember everything that he'd ever learned, and he went over and over and over it to secure it and fix it in his mind, because he felt it was all drifting away. And then also he felt that his status, as he thought of himself, as he always did, as a gentleman, And he knew that definitely, with the people he was associating with in the factory and the menial task, that he was no longer a gentleman. And so this is a perfect condition for deep depression to set in. And I believe that what Dickens did, by a monumental effort of will, which is utterly characteristic of him, his willpower is almost inconceivable, he rose above it. He rose above it, and once he was released from that factory and went to school and became a solicitor's clerk, the chief characteristic of Dickens was his great sunny good humour and his extraordinary ebullience and energy and fantasy and all of this. But of course, inside was everything that had happened to him, and he was pushing down on it to try to keep it out of his brain, out of his consciousness. But the journey of Dickens through the rest of his life really is the slow emergence of that dark, dark inner life. And he fought against it in his work, but increasingly it entered into his work, which has resulted in some of the greatest books ever written in the English language. It resulted in some very difficult personal relationships, above all with his wife, to some extent with his children, and sometimes with other people. If anybody crossed Dickens, he would unleash these terrifying thunderbolts against them. And he went through publishers like that again and again. He was dissatisfied with his publishers and always wrestling. But somehow the willpower and probably a certain innate joie de vivre would reassert itself. So there's this constant balancing act. He was pushing it down, but often his letters describe black depression. And when he wrote David Copperfield, and started writing it in a Bond church on the Isle of Wight, he had a full-scale nervous breakdown. He absolutely collapsed. And again, his willpower asserted itself again, but it was some days that he was just gone completely from the world. So this is an example, I suppose, of where you say a psychic or psychological condition, circumstance like that, in some ways can become productive, can be deeply productive, can be the source of extraordinary productivity. That Dickens was very familiar with misery in his life, though, cannot be doubted. For all his wonderful sociability and his phenomenal ability to make people laugh to the end of his life, his rather short life, he was 58 when he died. Nonetheless, this thing was hovering around him all the time.
How great it must have been to have seen him perform.
Ah, my goodness. And there's an example, you see, of how liberated he was by that. And you can't but feel that, and the rest of his life sort of proves this in a way, that the love that he needed, that he felt he'd lost, because of course he felt that his parents had betrayed him completely by putting him in that blacking warehouse, and really never forgave his mother for the fact that when his father got Dickens out of it, his mother said, "No, you go right back in there. We need that money. It's a perfectly good job." But Dickens's father overruled her. But it means that he found it very hard. His relationships were often rather strained, as I said, with his wife, with his children, and so on. The one relationship that never ever failed him was his relationship with his readers. And from the beginning, from the sketches by Boz and then of course the Pickwick Papers, English readers, particularly British readers, but then readers all over the world began to understand that he was speaking for mankind. He was speaking for ordinary people, not for the ruling classes, not for the wealthy middle classes. He was speaking for all humankind, for the core of human life. And when he finally decided that he wanted to read from his books, he found he found the consummation of that relationship that he'd had. So it was in 1850, something like that. He started a bit earlier, maybe. He started reading from A Christmas Carol. And the response was utterly overwhelming, because it's hard for us to quite imagine something that, well, I suppose the nearest thing I have to say is like a rock concert, because it is that everybody in the audience knew Dickens's books almost as well as he did himself. And the characters that he brought on, every time he brought on another character, Sam Weller, Mr. Pickwick, Oliver Twist, any of these great characters, Mrs. Gamp, and so on, there was a round of applause because they showed up, like Frank Sinatra singing, "I Did It My Way." It's kind of, yay, at last, here it is. And also, we have to acknowledge that he was a great actor. I mean, you know that he was a great actor because all the great actors of his day, people like his friend Macready, said, thank God he isn't an actor, because if he was, he'd wipe us all out. It's so remarkable what he did. He had no experience as an actor at all, apart from in amateur shows, and yet he filled these 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 seat auditorium with programs which lasted sometimes 2-3 hours long, playing dozens of characters, going through the most intense emotions and the most joyous comedy, held people utterly spellbound. And in later years, when he did The Death of Nancy, with such a capacity to evoke the violence and the pity of that scene, people fainted, they wept, it was a more emotional age in a way than ours, but the evidence is absolutely there that he was a spellbinding actor, and that was bliss for him. I mean, if he could have done it all his life, he would have done. But the truth is that it pretty well killed him, because he did these huge tours. And as I say, without any real preparation, not knowing how to warm up or anything like that, just by willpower, again, he would, especially in the second big American tour that he did as a reader, he would wake up every day with no voice at all, not a hoarse voice, not a croaky voice, no voice at all. And any actor or singer will tell you that's just terrifying when that happens to you. And he just somehow willed his voice back. And he managed to do the show every night perfectly audibly. People did say he was a bit hoarse, but he was perfect, got all his laughs, and people wept in just the same way. And then he'd collapse, totally collapse afterwards. Sometimes couldn't speak for an hour after the performance, couldn't get up off the sofa, but nothing would stop him because he needed his fix of audience love. That was what he lived for, really. Extraordinary.
You have this great knowledge of and affinity with Dickens, and I want to ask you about how you select projects. I mean, you've mentioned this enormous undertaking writing about Wells, for example, or some of the roles you've played. You reminded me of a conversation, it just came back to me many, many years ago when I first started working in the theatre, having a conversation with two actors. It was towards the end of the run. We only had 3 or 4 days to go. And they had both just turned down a role. One of them, if I remember correctly, because he said he just didn't feel right. He didn't feel he could bring anything to that role. The other one said that, the role itself was fine, but it was a smaller role than he was used to playing. And he was worried about perceptions within the profession, that sort of thing, which at the time fascinated me, the idea that one would turn things down. Could I ask you to tell us a little about how you make those choices? Which things appeal to you and how?
Well, when it comes to roles in the theatre particularly, but also, I suppose, in movies, I think you know immediately whether you want to be that character.
Yeah.
Do you want to be and play that person? Do you want, because you're going to spend a lot of your time with that person.
Yes.
Being that person, thinking that person's thoughts, taking on that person's shape, going on that person's journey through the play. And when I was a young actor, of course, I just wanted to do everything. Anything, everything and anything. And I was extraordinarily lucky when I was young. I got my first job before I left drama school. I then acted at the Edinburgh Festival, not to play anything particularly remarkable. It was a group production of Wojciech, Buchner's play Wojciech, and so the parts were more or less, apart from one of the three leading characters, we all played lots and lots of people. So I actually made my debut in the professional theatre as the front end of a horse. But in Wojciech, not in Panto, but still, it was the front end of a horse. That's gives you a glimpse of my performance. And but then I went into rep, to the Lincoln rep, and I played wonderful parts, one after another, great, big, leading, fantastic parts. And then I went back to Edinburgh, and I continued to do that. I was just lucky. I was working at the Young Lyceum Company, then I was at the Travers Theatre. We had a great hit with one play. We came down to London, we did it at the Open Space Theatre. Then Harry Seacombe came and saw us do it and decided to buy the play and be in it, but took all the cast with him. And so I had my West End debut, in my name in a box and all of that nonsense. And then I did touring with political theatre, and then I did stuff in the Fringe. I played Titus Sanders. I played, really and truly, I played everything. But I do remember one moment that must be, I suppose, significant. Was there was a wonderful play called Mary Barnes, written by David Edgar, yes, about a woman who's a schizophrenic, and her the journey she took to recovery, if that's the word one uses, and the psychiatrist, the young psychiatrist who took her on that journey, and the play was absolutely marvelous, and they asked me to play a doctor in it, and I just said no, not the doctor, the psychiatrist. I just said that. I just said it without any. I just said it straight away. I didn't think, oh, this is a bit brave of me. I just said, no, not that part, that part. And they said, okay. And then I had a huge success playing that part. So I must have been pretty focused on what I was wanting to do. And then out of the blue, totally, came this offer from the great and now dead director John Dexter to play the part of Mozart in Amadeus. Out of the blue, he'd never seen my work. Somebody had seen me play that psychiatrist in Mary Barnes, who bore no resemblance to Mozart whatever, but obviously thought that I was pretty good, and said, that's who you need for that part. And it must have been the idea that Peter Schaffer had written a play about Mozart, must have had every young actor in the news that was the case, but nobody knew. Nobody had even heard of this play. Dexter phoned me before anybody knew about it and said, I want you to play the part. And then, as it happens, John Dexter and Peter Schaffer fell out very badly, and the play ended up at the National Theatre with Peter Hall directing, who just inherited me as, obviously, I was going to play Mozart. This was before Schofield had been cast, before Felicity Kendall or anybody else had been cast. I was just attached to the play. It's unbelievable, the good luck that I had. And at that stage in my career, what I wanted to do more than anything else was to play as many different kind of parts in as many different kind of plays as I possibly could. I just wanted to, I had a compulsion, which is the compulsion of many actors, which is I wanted to get away from being myself. I did not, well, particularly delighted with who I was. And so I just wanted to push things as far as I could. So I played Orlando in As You Like It, and everybody at the time thought that was hilarious, that I, who was never handsome in any conventional way, and quite often have been quite stocky, not at all anybody's idea of Orlando, who's supposed to be, young love incarnate. And but I adored playing Orlando. Then a point came. I did my work at the National Theatre. The Mozart was this kind of a stupendous success. I'd done the sonnets. I did a couple of other, Galileo and Sisterly Feelings at the National. And then I left the National, and I did 3 plays one after another, two new plays and a revival. Total Eclipse, in which I played Verlaine, by Christopher Hampton, a restoration, a new play by Edward Bond, amazing, daring new play, phenomenal character called Lord R, and finally a West End production of The Beastly Beatitudes of Balthazar B. Again, couldn't be more different from each other, all these characters. And then, when the play came to an end, and it sort of crawled to an end because it hadn't had very good reviews, but the producer kept it on and on and on for 10 months of playing to something like 20% audiences. And on Boxing Day, there were famously more people on stage than in the audience. We should invite them all back to the dressing room to do the play there. But anyway, I was utterly exhausted, not only physically, after this wave of really from 1973 to 1982. It was just, I had never stopped acting. Lucky beyond belief for that to be the case. I'd absolutely covered the whole waterfront of possible human characters to play. And suddenly I'd had enough. I knew that my lust for acting had been sated. And I was thrilled to go to America with the National Theatre then to teach and to direct, and then also to act in a little play by George Bernard Shaw, which was absolutely charming and lovely to do, and a little play by Michael Frayn, which was just a wonderful play. But the essence of it was the acting, was the directing and the writing and the teaching, and that provoked thoughts about acting in me, which I'd already been thinking about acting a lot and writing about it. I did a talk about acting at Goldsmiths College, and I was supposed to, tell the audience what it's like acting with Paul Schofield, and is Felicity Kendall as fun as she seems, which of course she is. But I then started to dig a bit deeper in why do we act? What's acting all about, and what's it like to be an actor? Because it's a strange thing. For most people in the world, fortunately, would rather die than stand on a stage in front of a large number of people and pretend to be somebody else. But for the rest of us, as I believed of myself, the definition of an actor is someone who's more at ease and at home on a stage than they are in their own front room.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to write some of this stuff, and through my extraordinary friendship with a great literary agent and huge personality called Peggy Ramsey, whom I had an extraordinarily intense relationship. She said to a publisher, Nick Hearn, she said, look, he wants to write something, he'll send it to you and see what you think. And Nick said, well, it's very good, actually. Would you like either to just make it part of a volume of essays, or would you like to write a whole book? And I said, yay, whole book it is. That I got that news on just the day before I left for America. And so all sorts of other things started to open up for me. And my whole relationship to acting rather changed then. And then I started wanting to do something else, totally different with acting, which was a lot more like exploring myself a bit more than trying to project myself into other people. I still love to create character. That's what we want to do. Transformation is the name of the game for me. But now, I suppose what happens is that as you begin to learn a little bit about life, you want to show some of what you've learned, And I have tried to do that as much as I can as an actor, but it's very different from my old days looking for glory. I was a glory boy. I wanted the glory of acting, the glory of the first night, the glory of the wonderful reviews and so on. But now I'm a bit more interested in trying to create something original and fresh, but it's very elusive because, of course, people always want to cast you for the things that they've seen you already do, and they want basically for you to do the same thing again. I mean, I adored playing Gareth in Four Weddings and a Funeral. Who wouldn't? It's the most wonderful and heavenly part. But it is true that ever since then, people have, wanted me to play parts like that again, what I call the life and death of the party parts, or they expect me to be like Gareth in real life, which I'm not really at all.
The two questions have come in from people who are listening in at the moment. One is from an actor just starting out,
yeah,
who says, first of all, he says, "Can I say you're an inspiration? How does it feel standing on the stage doing a one-man show? And how do you combat any nerves or anxiety?" And the second one is, again, "You're such an amazingly accomplished actor. Have you ever struggled with confidence? And if so, how did you overcome this?" Would you like to answer those two?
Yeah, certainly. About the one-man plays, to be candid with you, I find them 100 times more relaxing than doing plays with other actors. Because the great thing about that, it's not that I don't like doing plays with other actors. I absolutely love it, but it depends on so many other factors. You know, you're trying as actors to create a communal feeling when you do a play together, and that can come and go a little bit, and also you have to as an actor in a play with other people. You do, of course, have to know your own part, but you have to know everybody else's part too. You've got to really, really be absolutely focused on what they're saying and the rhythm of it and how it goes and all of that. So it's the most exhilarating thing on earth when a company really has a chemistry together and it goes brilliantly. But with a one-person play, the responsibility is entirely yours. And you would be suicidal if you hadn't prepared properly for it, because you would feel absolutely desperate. So you must rehearse. Now, of course, I've done lots of, I've done 12 one-man plays. I always call them plays because the ones I do, I think of as plays, not as shows. A one-man show to me is something else. That's like a sort of fabulously interesting after-dinner speech, in a sense. Whereas a one-man play, we hope, has a dramatic action and the character changes and so on and so on. But you do have to be completely grounded in it. You've really, really, really got to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, what you're saying, and so on. And that is quite challenging, quite often very challenging, because you never really have quite enough time to rehearse it. You should have probably twice as much time as you have for doing an ordinary play, because you think about a show like being Shakespeare or The Mystery of Charles Dickens that I've been doing, or that's nearly 2 hours of me just speaking on my own. So in other words, that's more than the texts of Hamlet, Lear, and Macbeth rolled into one. It's just me saying it, and you've to be alive to everything in every second. You have to have a tremendous confidence. Now, on the other hand, I can say, and I hope it doesn't sound like a contradiction what I've just said, if you happen to have a memory lapse of some sort, you can make it up. Because nobody else depends on it. I'm very, very good at making up Dickens and very, very good at making up Shakespeare. I'm a fluent iambic improviser. But I try not to do that, of course, but I mean, one is human. The second thing is that it's a very pure form of storytelling.
Yeah.
And as with any storyteller, you know, in the pub, at home, in a pulpit, at an after-dinner function, the great thing is to connect to your audience. You've got to make sure that they want to hear what comes next. That's the fundamental art, you know. You've just got absolutely to tell a story in such a way that people are aching to know what happens next. And I do all kinds of different one-person shows. In A Christmas Carol, I play 35 characters. But most importantly, I play the narrator. I play, in a sense, Dickens himself. I don't play Dickens. I would never think of actually doing it as Dickens. But it's the narrator who buttonholes the audience. And so it's quite a skill, this. You have to establish the narrator, get the audience absolutely on the edge of their seat, and then just quickly evoke the character, become the character. Maybe for just a line, 2 lines, or maybe for half a page, you become that character absolutely, you change, you transform, they believe they're in the presence of that character, and then you're the narrator again. And you bring it all back down again, so as we keep following the story. And that, I think, actually is a rule that applies to acting a lot. I discovered when I did Equus, I did the national tour of Equus, and I played Martin Dysart. And like many of Peter Shaffer's plays, I would say almost all of Peter Shaffer's plays, it's a kind of a thriller. It's a kind of a mystery story. Yeah. What, why does he do this? What's going on? We're going to get closer to the mystery eventually. And so I discovered Martin Dysart, of course, talks to the audience all the time, as do many characters in Shaffer's plays. And I've really refined this art of getting them to be absolutely just longing to know what is coming next. Why is this boy doing this? And it's very exciting when that happens. The audience is so present. They're so in the minute with it, There's no, and that's, of course, I've always thought is the whole point of performance, whether it's music or dance or acting, is to bring the audience into the minute. Normally we walk around and our head is full of the past, going over and over what's already happened and why and so on, or the future, what on earth is going to happen, when and how can I do this, that and the other. But you come to the theatre for time present, to just actually be there in the second that it's happening, in a rhythm with all your fellow audience members. And when that happens, we all know it. In a theatre, in a concert hall, in an opera house, in a dance theatre, you always know. You know it, absolutely. It's totally palpable. It's a physical thing. You could almost film the concentration, the focus coming from the audience. And that's the thing that makes everybody, when it's a wonderful piece of theatre, you just absolutely, you've been released from all that burden of the past and the burden of the future. You're just there in the second. So that's very much part of the one person thing. Have I ever lost faith in myself? Yeah, only every day.
Yes.
Every single day of my life, I think. And sometimes I go to see a play and I see other actors, and they may not even be that wonderful or special, but I think, my God, how do they do that? I don't know. How do they do that acting thing? I just honestly feel sometimes that Cyril Cusack, the great Irish actor, said, every job when it comes to an end feels like the last one you'll ever have. And every play, when you start it, feels like the first play you've ever done. Yeah. And I'm afraid that's what we have to live with. There's no evading that. I mean, there are people, I have met a few actors who have a sort of preternatural self-confidence. And there are also actors who don't care very much whether, who just do it, and aren't judging themselves particularly. They're just animal actors who just love the physical and mental and emotional exercise of it. And I admire and envy them deeply. I'm very much not that person. And my undoing is that sometimes as the performance goes on, and if I don't hit the right zones and the right notes, I said, go, what? Why? And then I've lost the moment. Then I'm not in the minute. And when I'm not in the minute, the audience won't be in the minute. And that's a terrible thing. Awful. But I have ways of combating that, but it's difficult. But it's true, I've never had things like what happened to the late and really great Ian Holm, where he just suddenly one day, after years and years and years of playing huge parts and so on, when he was doing The Iceman Cometh at the Aldwych Theatre, very difficult, long 25-minute speech at the end of the first act. all had gone wonderfully well, went to his dressing room, locked the door and didn't come out again, and didn't act on stage for 20 years after that. You know, it can so easily happen. There are things, you know, there are tablets you can take, beta blockers and things like that, which help. It's better if you can possibly find out what's actually going on and why you know.
There's a question has come in, which is picking up on that, is to do with the discipline required of an actor on stage. The questioner says, refers back to what you said earlier about Dickens needing the love of the audience. And also there was times when he went on stage when he was very depleted and needed the energy. Has there been a time when, I mean, I know the larger theatres like the National have understudies and so on when necessary, but has there been a time when you've gone on stage and you really would almost rather be anywhere else? For whatever reason, it's just been a terrible day, something has happened, whatever that may be, you perhaps just feel unwell. And how do you get through that?
You just have to tell yourself very strictly that there will be people in that audience who may never have seen a play before, who have certainly not seen the play that you're doing, who have come here and paid probably quite a large amount of money in the hope of having their imagination stirred and their life questioned and their imaginations revived. And you just cannot let them down because they may never come again. If you don't do it well enough, they'll say, oh, well, that's the theatre. No, I'll go and see a movie next time. And I think so you have the responsibility for the whole image of the theatre in your hands. You are its ambassador, you know, and for those of us who believe, as I do very passionately, in the curative powers of the theatre, in its capacity to reach, as the old ad used to say, parts that other arts can't quite reach. You know, each art has its own special zone, but there's something that happens in a theatre that no other art can quite reproduce. And it's to do with human sympathy, direct human contact with your fellow human beings. And, you know, it's always, every play is really, even it's a mad comedy. I think it was David Hare who put it like this. He said, the question always is, how should we live?
Yeah.
Is the question. You go into the theatre, you may not know that consciously. You may think, oh, I just want, you know, I want to be taken out of myself. But it's always a representation of human behavior, one way or another. And so you're always thinking about that. But I don't mean to say, I'm afraid I wish I could piously say, so I have never given a poor performance. Of course I have. And I've struggled, but I've struggled with it. I've really fought it as hard as I possibly can. But the other thing there is that sometimes, of course, you know, it's happened to me a number of times in my career, you just haven't got it right. You simply haven't got it right. And then that's very severe. That's a very serious thing. Because, oh goodness, you can go towards the theatre with feet of lead, or else you may feel that the production hasn't got it right at all. And then you really, that requires what I've always said, and it's a very unexpected thing. People, often young actors, say to me, what do you need? What's the most important gift that you should have as an actor? And I say, a good character.
Yeah.
You've got to have a sense of responsibility about the performance, about yourself, and towards the audience, and, as I said, towards the theatre as a thing. And the same thing applies to movies, of course. The thing that is unforgivable is people who give lazy and indulgent performances. I mean, we can much more easily forgive an actor, and we've all been that actor, who's giving a bad performance, misjudged performance, who really hasn't cracked the part at all. You can forgive that, but someone who just sort of slouches through a performance. And I have seen that, I'm afraid to say. Even sometimes, to my great annoyance, those same actors have come up to me and said, "Oh, I loved your book, Being an Actor, so fantastic." I said, "Oh, you obviously haven't read it." Because I'm pretty clear about that. Now, I'm going to do something rather strange just now, Stephen, which is I'm going to move rooms because my battery is just about to expire and I'll have to plug it in. But keep going. We can carry on talking as I move around.
Well, I totally agree with what you were just saying. I mean, there's a huge difference between a poor performance or production and one which one just doesn't like. But there's still a quality threshold, I think, where one doesn't agree with the or something like that. But that's the difference between the sort of thing you're describing as well.
Oh, come on. Sorry. Am I back? Good. That's great. Sorry. It was like my computer had a stroke, a little stroke. So,
the three questions have come in broadly similar, so I'll paraphrase them as one, if I may, and which is actually coming back almost full circle to where we began, which is to do with, could you tell us a little about how you have addressed your sort of mental health during the lockdown, if you have addressed that consciously at all, and or how has the lockdown influenced your mental health, do you think?
Well, I hate confinement of any kind. And this most severe version of the lockdown, where one can only go out for an hour a day or something like that, has been a terrible burden to me. And it's been, in a way, worse because at the beginning of the year, I was lucky enough to have a job in Atlanta, Georgia. I was in Atlanta, Georgia for the whole of January. And there's no lockdown there. And the shops are open and the restaurants are open. And you can go wherever you like for a long walk. And I realized then that so much of what gives me, anyway, my mental energy is the stimulus of the outside world. If I just go for a walk, I live in Highgate, which is a wonderful high up with a wonderful view across London and parks and so on around it. And just to go through a park and to look at the different flowers and smell the different smells and see the different faces and the dogs running by and all the rest of it, just that, on that simple level, you're revitalize and recharge. And if you're stuck indoors, as I was self-isolating when I came back from America for a week before I got a COVID test, I literally felt as if I was in prison. It doesn't matter. You can get stimulation from the television and things like that, but that's not what it is. It's your bodily connection to the world. Fortunately, we have a very lovely and large garden, and that's a wonderful thing. So I've been incredibly luckier than many people who may be confined in small spaces in a bed sit, the kind of place I used to live in when I was a younger actor. I think that would have really, and the idea of having to quarantine in an airport hotel for possibly 10 days and pay through the nose for it, but live without that recycled air and that food I can't even begin to think about, and to see nobody at all, I'm not sure I would have been able to endure that. And of course, people in this pandemic, all through, I mean, people throughout have had awful deprivations of every kind, and of course the doctors and the nurses and all the employees of the NHS have some of them just been in a tunnel really from the beginning, just at it non-stop, and seeing sights that nobody should really have to see, of pain and devastation, and basically I'm saying I've had a very easy pandemic.
And there's another question's coming, which I think will be a very nice final question for us this afternoon. Is, in an ideal world, what would be your next role?
Yes. Well, there's a play written that I just adore. It's a new play, and it's I don't know why, but it's the moment I read it, I thought, well, this is the part of my lifetime. This will be the play, and we were going to do it before the pandemic, and it's a play about the great French farce writer Georges Feydeau. And Feydeau, astonishingly, was confined to a mental asylum at the end of his life. And while he was in the asylum, he put on plays, his own plays, with the inmates. And it sounds as if it might be a sort of rather bad taste joke, but it's not at all. It's a wonderful, wonderful piece of writing, which really gets to the heart of what the theatre might all be about. And it's the most fantastic part I think I've ever read for myself. You know, I can't pretend that, you know, there are some actors whose real relationship is to the outside world, and they bring that to their work as actors, and I love them for that. But I have to admit that I've been stage struck from childhood, from infancy. And I love the theatre, and I think the theatre tells us a great deal about life. I mean, the form of the theatre, as Shakespeare knew, it's a great metaphor for life, you know. All the world's a stage, and so on, fast forward. Although I have to say that from the very scene from which that single line comes, the greatest line Shakespeare ever wrote is in As You Like It, when Orlando goes off and the Duke turns to all the courtiers in the forest in exile. They hate being in the forest. But he says to them, "Thou seest," pointing at Orlando, "we are not all alone unhappy." And that's what the theatre tells us.
Yeah.
We are in it together. We are not alone in our unhappiness.
Well, I really hope we'll all be in a theatre soon to see you perform this. I really do.
Well,
It's a great pleasure talking to you for an hour. Thank you so much for sparing the time. It's been really Thank you again.
I'm sorry for the missing 2 minutes.
We've got a tour of the flat. That's something.
Indeed, yes. Bye-bye then.
Bye-bye.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you so much, Simon. I'm sure I'm not alone in saying I could have sat and listened to both of you talking for another hour, 2, 3. That was glorious. Some really beautiful things. And if nothing else, I was just reminded how in renewed a longing to be in those spaces with other people. I love the way you talked about theatre and that being very present in this moment. There's almost nothing else, but you're there with others, and I know that we're all really missing that. But yeah, thank you. That was wonderful. There were lots of beautiful threads of pearls of wisdom and real kind of humanity. So thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for being so generous and eloquent with your generosity about your life and the things that you've done and the things that give you passion. And yeah, it's been a really, really wonderfully inspiring afternoon. So thank you so much, both of you. Stephen, thank you for guiding that glorious meandering conversation so elegantly. Yeah, it was lovely, really lovely. So that's it, folks, for this afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your questions. I'm so sorry to those of you who we had a few unanswered ones in our little Q&A box, so we're sorry we didn't quite manage to squeeze everything in, but we really appreciate your input. It adds an energy and a dynamic to these conversations that without you it just wouldn't have that same little sparkle. So thank you so much for contributing. And all that's left to say is we've got another few more events coming up. The brilliant people at Arts Over Borders who we've been working on this programme, just want to say a big thank you to them. They've been curating the programme that's already happened, but they've got a few more things up their sleeves that they want to share with us. So I think one that we have got confirmed that's coming up in a couple of weeks on Thursday the 25th of February is the amazing writer Matt Haig. He's going to be here at 4 o'clock, so do tune in for that. But please follow us on social media if social media is your thing, or keep an eye on our website, and or do indeed drop us a line and to get updates and announcements that are coming. And I just want to, apart from saying a huge thank you to Stephen and Simon, we must just thank our wonderful funders, the amazing Arts Council who have funded this programme to make this all possible and bring this to you, and also NHS Charities Together, our fabulous trust charity called Heads On. They work with us to bring in that finance to make this programme possible. And yeah, and also, very importantly, need to say a big thank you to our partners. So I've already mentioned Arts Over Borders. They are incredible. If you haven't heard of them before, look them up online. They do some amazing things, yeah, really extraordinary events. And it's great that although lots of their stuff that is usually curating things happening in physical spaces, we are so blessed that they've been part of creating these amazing digital spaces for us to come together. And also Hospital Rooms, who curated the arts, the visual arts side of the programme. Do check out what they put together for us. There's some amazing workshops. And not least, our tech partner. I know I always say this when I come on, technology, I have a little bit of a fear of it. So CogApp, they taught us how to press all the right buttons and get everything set up so that we can come together, because as we know, this time is a long time apart, and that is a slow and heavy challenge to bear. So it is a really important that we can come together, and the art and creativity can be that vehicle for connection. And yeah, and hopefully your spirits like mine have been lifted this afternoon. So that's it for now, folks. Do join us on the 25th with Matt Haig. But yeah, thank you, Simon. Thank you, Stephen. We have a love having you here with us. And yeah, and we'll see you all soon. All right, bye for now. Bye.